by The Red Onion, the Bay Area's finest hamburgers, located at 11900 San Pablo Avenue in El Chorrito. Tell them Twilight Garage sent you.
Twilighters! The thanks are completely ours. Dear sweet Casey Fields, my co-host, producer Alex, I again, David Rogerson, where we ask you to please join us in recounting what has been known as the Manson murders, the Manson family, any of these strange helter-skeltery catchphrases as we dive into Twilight Garage. We're on episode 31 right now, having a really good time. We kind of jump around. The moods of these episodes can be quite divergent and fun. We've had some of the greatest experts in this field visit us. I love to give thanks to what I call the yellow brick road of all the researchers and all the people that have gone ahead of us. We've got some wonderful commenters here on Twilight Garage. We're hoping to speak. I want to figure out how I can have a nice conversation with Sam Smith that isn't on the keyboard, because he has been our greatest commenter in terms of insightful, just wonderful details, because we're going to be getting into some of the things he's been asking about recently as we continue a sub-genre of our overall Manson arc we're working on now. We've been promising some other subjects. Maybe we'll get to them. Who knows, man? I'm just having so much fun with this. I hope you are as well. We do love you. We do thank you for sharing your very life with us. But we're going through Kurt Gentry's book with Vincent Bugliosi, the very famous Helter Skelter. We are a few chapters in, and if you're joining along with us, we are in the low 100s. We're not quite in the 200s. So we're going to be reviewing between about page 106 and 170 today.
And we go first edition on everything.
Every time. This one was a beautiful first edition that Ranger just ate. You can see it's freshly wet from
one of a kind.
That dog, I swear. Anyhow, thank you kindly. So what I want to ask you about, Casey, is what has been really burning me up. Reading this, people see this very linear track. These people did this thing. This guy had influence. He sent these kids. You go kill for me. You go kill for me. And then there was the mysterious trial. The women put on quite these displays.
Yep.
And then Charlie. A lot of misconceptions. For me, what is very interesting is what I've been listening to today, which is the November 12th interview of Al Springer.
Yes.
From 69. We are not that far from the murders.
Yep.
And we have Al Springer, not Susan, as we always think of, and Sybil Brand right in her mouth. We have an independent source very much laying out Hinman, Shea, Tate, LaBianca. 1 second. Something's going on. Let me turn this. I think it's my fucking. We're going to turn it down. Sorry.
Keep it rolling.
Keep it rolling. Okay, so.
I didn't hear it.
Yeah, okay, I just want to make sure I was driving the shit out of me. I just want to make sure it wasn't my phone or something. Heard a little Merle Haggard.
Take a deep breath. When you're ready, just go.
So we have this various elements that were very, if we look at the book again, depending on whose narrative we're going to listen to,
Mhm.
very true to the facts as they were presented. His testimony is very much just right off the top from the LAPD interviews that were conducted that you can find on the great Bo Emerson's site, Cielo Drive.
It's also available on YouTube, Cielo Drive's YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's what I was in fact going back to. I have listened to that interview time and time again, and I've spoken to survivors about it that, I enjoyed the interview, and boy, the reaction to that was less than favorable because apparently out at the ranch, you can imagine the flip side of his interview, the way he spoke about everyone. He was very condescending. He was very not just self-assured, but narcissistic and tough. And he was trying to have this agenda and get Danny back and have all these things happen. So the context of it, I can see he was a very ugly personality, not an agreeable fellow, which is typical in that scene. A lot of the bike club guys can be that way. But what I found interesting was that it was a great counterbalance to everything else that was being said. Now, what are your thoughts on?
I'm 100% with you. Al Springer gives a little bit different perspective, right? Because he's a member of the Straight Satans. He's not a part of the family. And I think he's kind of upset, right? Because he had to stay over on the 15th of August, and the next morning they get raided, and he's wrapped up in that Barker Ranch raid. Spawn Ranch raid.
And it looks like he got manhandled.
Yeah.
And you can see the pictures of him. There's 3 really, really strong images of him. And I think that's why I was so excited to finally hear his interviews. After looking at the book where he's pictured, after all these things, I find it interesting that if he had been interviewed after this book came out, after he'd been made so famous with that photograph of him all hemmed up without his shirt on, right?
Yeah.
Because in this interview, a lot of what he talked about is him being a family man and his old lady, and what he didn't like about spending the night out at the ranch is it was an inconsistency. Married guy, back at Torrance with his family.
Yep.
Not up at the ranch with Danny. So he didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
And to have his picture be made famous, shirtless, he's off, to the left because they got him off to the right. So I've looked at that picture a million times since I was a kid. It's burned in my mind. That's how I always see him. Well, man, after I read the interviews and listen to the transcripts, wow, he would really be unhappy about that now. But to have this information served up, we're looking at September, October. So basically, almost exactly 3 months later, to have a full, almost transcription of what happened from an ancillary player, though they couldn't take his interview as legal testimony, as they were advising him when they did it, and that they were going to have to follow up a bunch. But that soon, they had him on record in the PD, a willing witness. And so you got to think about, how long was that talked about before the cops put that together? Because they were absolutely not cooperating, as we all know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the cops were lost, man. I think that Paul Tate was closer on the tail of the family than LAPD was. I mean, they didn't officially break the case publicly until December 1st. So, it wasn't, you're right, it wasn't until November, which they really were building that thing.
Absolutely. And the whole Paul Tate thing, let's also reflect on that, because this is a very short timeline. You got these people, they're going through their family emotions. You got Paul Tate, he's 45 years old. Think about his career, all of his covert operations, all of the military orders he's handed out over the years, and the different things he's done in the government and in the service of the government. And here he is going to retire. His wife has this successful hairdressing business in Texas. His daughter is in the industry in Hollywood, has this up and coming director. And then Jay, who they have very wisely gotten in on the ground floor with Abigail Folger and invested in Jay Sebring's future enterprise, which really, if we look at it, it was Vidal Sassoon.
Yep.
Who didn't he buy all those rights and everything? He didn't even make it happen till nearly 10 years later. Like it really started to roll for him about 7 years later in 1976, Vidal Sassoon, an incredible revolution in hairstyling. He got into having the college, the beauty college in London, all the things that Jay had talked about.
If we don't look good or you don't look good, we don't look good.
And there it is, right? And that was such a Sebring-esque thing. So you've got Paul Tate, very savvy man, very handsome, very rugged, very capable guy. Now he's out there running his investigation. Now, how close do you feel he actually got? Because I've read a bit, but I know your depth on that is
greater. He
greater.
had 2 weeks when the murders occurred. He had 2 weeks left before his retirement from the military. So he did his 2 weeks, came back down, grew the mustache. He threw on a leather jacket. People always say he grew out his hair. You could tell in the pictures his hair's not very long. Right?
No, but it looked like kind of hip and casual. I've made some good memes on that one. I love that picture of him. He's like hanging out of a van talking to some girl, and he has what looks like a fake beard on, and his hair is like kind of like pseudo Jay, but
the girl
short.
The girl isn't Nancy Pittman, but I think she, in my opinion, looks a little bit like her. You know,
she has a very Nancy look. So I made this goofy meme, and it just says, "Yeah, I'm hip, sister. Take me to the ranch."
And I guess from what I hear, those were stage shots. They were part of the promotion of his book.
Exactly.
But from what I heard is that he made it as far out to Mojave, and you're real familiar with that is.
Absolutely.
So,
that's about an hour out.
So I don't think he made it as far as like Ridgecrest, but he had heard that there were hippies out in the desert that were somehow associated or had knowledge of his daughters.
Well, and the family had spent time in Mojave.
Yep.
Which is back then a fairly common thing. You would have a mechanical breakdown with something like an RV or a bus or a four-wheel drive vehicle or whatever. And it was, you'd maybe get limped into the gas station. Usually you get towed in, whatever the unfortunate situation was. And it was literally like these old movies you watch now that these young people can't fathom. You know, the guy standing there in the greasy coveralls, he's wiping his range with his old shop rags. And, well, dang, alt-miter on this here unit. Brother, that's going to take, 4 business days. Get this thing up there. So then you'd have to, what are you going to do for 4 days?
And I remember as a kid, growing up in the 80s, watching all the Bugs Bunny cartoons. That was my first reference to the Mojave, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so when I finally made my way out there, it didn't look as I expected. I thought it was going to be sand dunes and more like you would see in Death Valley. But no, yeah. So he made his way out there, and Reeve Whitson was allegedly on the case with him trying to find the family. Now I don't know what
feeds a lot of the whole the CIA plots and all of that type of things that are really a really big fodder now. The whole chaos book. Now, do you have any credence to that?
Man, I have a hard time with most of it.
Do you think Reed?
I think
do you think
that-
that he was out there?
For 50 years, we battled against this narrative. And now here we are in 2025, and we're battling against
Well,
the
we're
whole.
gifted with this thing. And look,
Yes.
look at the guy.
Yes.
It's like they made this crime. They had to color code it, right? They had to like give the McDonald's thing, like, if you see this cover, it must be about Charles Manson. Because the other one they do is for the Nazis. It's kind of close, but you can usually differentiate. Like, is it Manson or Hitler? Our two favorites.
And I was entertained by Tom's book.
Oh, absolutely. It's a wonderful. Here's the thing. And I just
Oh, no,
ran you over that.
no, you're good. You're good.
This thing, again, we're going to have to battle this thing forever. And here's why. Much like Kurt Gentry's piece, I credit him more than Bugliosi because
Absolutely.
it is a wonderfully written book. The way he will just drop a quote in or put a phrase from one of the girls in the narrative, it lends automatic credence to what's being said, real or imagined. So this book is the biggest indication and vindication of this narrative possible. The fact that the people were convicted on the narrative years earlier was incredible. The fact that this book was produced and has become a Bible is even more incredible.
So read this first.
Yes.
I would say read this second, and then Tom, and then get into George and Shrek.
This is more current, this new narrative we're talking about. So when you see things on YouTube and you see things here on these various channels, they'll be referring to chaos constantly. Joe Rogan, a lot of these right-wing pundits and different people, it's funny, have grabbed a hold of this narrative about the CIA and LSD. And it's an incredible work. I think Tom O'Neill of fiction. I think you have one of the greatest screenplays. I think you have one of the most incredible works of fiction I've ever encountered. And if you would just embrace that, I think you should be handsomely rewarded. If this thing could be acknowledged, much like Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is a complete work of fiction. Are there truths in it? Of course. There's a lot of stuff in there. All fiction has truth in it. That's why it's good fiction. That's why it's believable. That's why we can suspend disbelief and enjoy it. Very enjoyable read. Had a great time, just like Helter Skelter. But these are false flags. And Tom, baby, you should be, man, how many tens of millions should he have just off of that?
I hope so.
No, I mean, if it was a screenplay and he would acknowledge it as being fiction, because the survivors, there are people who are alive who are implicated in your book, Tom O'Neill, that you have irrevocably damaged. You've said some stuff, man, that's just, bro, you can't take back. That's uncool.
I won't go that far, but I will say that it's incomplete, and that I guess possibly in the future, some of the things that Tom believes may come out or they may not. I don't know.
Well, in the meantime, like I say, to put people who are simple, interesting, cool people who are survivors, either victims, families, the survivors on the family side, whatever, we're talking about human beings. And then there's going to be consequences, as you pointed out. For example, the guy who delivered the bicycle to Abigail Folger.
Yes.
That guy got badgered. Stephen, who found the gun.
Yes.
All these, there were minors who got called out in a book. There were so many things that happened in this book that could never happen again.
Yep.
And reading all the testimony that you and I have been talking about early in the murder with all the Day Shin.
Yeah.
Because I read those
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
So could you please enlighten our viewers what we've been reading this week that we actually want to talk about as well?
I've been going through the May 15th and 16th, 1971 volumes 90 and 91 of the penalty phase of the trial. Now, this is Mary Brunner and Nancy Pittman's testimonies, which for the most part, I believe have relevance because it deals directly in the unaliving of Gary Hinman.
Absolutely.
And what comes up, which is very odd, is in the grand jury testimony, Mary says that she was there for Hinman's unalivement, whereas in the penalty phase, a little over a year later, he's now saying that she wasn't there, but that Leslie Van Houten was there with Bobby Beausoleil and Susan Atkins.
And do you believe that some of this false testimony or altered testimony, however you want to look at it, depending on which testimony, or maybe none of them are correct, was motivated by her son Michael potentially being in the balance?
Dude, you just nailed it right there. They threatened to take away her kid and they were going to put her back in jail. And I mean, I can't even imagine the thought of a mother. He was safe with living with his grandparents in Wisconsin. She, for the most part, was in the clear. And the LAPD was coming out with the people from the DA's office to interview her, to try to get more information, to try to threaten her to make some kind of immunity
So
deal.
the coercement situation.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so I still tend to believe that Mary was at Hinman's, but it just kind of threw like a pause in me because even Susan Atkins at one point said that it wasn't Mary, it was Leslie that was there. And just recently, last year, Bobby Beausoleil gave an interview to Hamilton Morris, where Hamilton kind of asked him who was at Hinman's, and he said it was me and two women. And he wouldn't even here 54 years later, he's protecting the two women.
Well, it's really difficult when you get into this case, as we have. I have certain feelings about this case. There's things I'd love to say, but there's survivors out there who have potential conspiracy charges that aren't ever going to go away because we're talking about 187s.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there's a conspiracy thing, we could be talking all these years later.
Yes.
56 years later, now in 2025 that we're recording this program.
Mm-hmm.
And you could still be incarcerated. So
no statute of limitations on
187s.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I have feelings. I'm putting some conclusions together in my mind as my knowledge on this case grows. And I would like to speak more on them for the edification of y'all, but I don't feel comfortable doing it because it would damage people's lives who are now living a free life. And the thing is, maybe they were involved in things. Maybe they did conspire to 187 people. But however, life goes on, people change, and is it an appropriate jacket to throw on somebody now? And unfortunately, I think the only way we're going to get true information is if people understand that we're going to be speaking into a safety deposit box, basically, and the things are not going to be revealed till later, because for history's sake, I think we do owe an explanation of the various truths, because everyone who experienced being a victim, being a perpetrator, being a friend of a perpetrator, a friend of a victim is going to have different motives and different experiences. And for Mary Brunner, who is someone who I initially really didn't care for, honestly, she had this very mousy physical presence, and she did this thing and wouldn't look and wouldn't talk and was being deceitful. And I didn't understand the dynamic of her baby Michael being in the balance till later. The more I get to know about the case, they probably used her to get in the door.
You know what's interesting too, what she said in her testimony was Bugliosi asked her in cross-examination, who was threatening you? And a lot of people would think, well, it's the family, of course. No, no, no. She said, Daishin and people from your office are threatening me.
Absolutely. I think there's a certain innocence about Mary. I'm not saying she's naive to the point of being dumb or something, but she's Midwestern. There's this truth in her. I think, like a lot of these women, and this is the hard part to understand. So please, Twilighters, and people just watching the channel who are not official Twilighters, like, subscribe, please, for God's sake. These things are, you have to understand these people's characters and what the time is and how these variety of these people's characters meshed. They weren't going to get in the front door of Gary Hinman's house without Mary Brunner, who had lived there, who had had a previous potentially romantic relationship.
Great point.
With Gary Hinman. So why would she do that? Well, because the father of her child probably said it was a good idea. What was the real motive? We don't really know. There's again, everybody says something different.
Mm-hmm.
You've got people saying that Beausoleil had bought mescaline, $1,000 worth, which if you look at it now, they would basically be cornering the market on mescaline.
Yeah.
To what end? I've done mescaline. Let me tell you something. I did it once. I'm good, babe. I'm fine. Like, if you want to deal with a vial of acid, like, I can help you. Like, LSD is some shit you need to do again and again and again and again. You know what I mean? Mushrooms? Peyote? What are you talking about? That's you're on the other side when you have these sacred psychedelics.
Oh, that's something
not,
too, by the way, that I liked from Hamilton Morris's interview with Beausoleil.
What's that?
Through talking to Beausoleil, he realized that it actually wasn't mescaline. It was a peyote extract, which I guess is different. And Hamilton is a pharmacologist and a researcher, right? And so he's like up on, but so he was asking how they synthesize the drug and everything. He went into the deep like chemistry of it all.
Well, and that would be a better explanation because then here we go. That's a completely different motivation. Are you, as Bobby Beausoleil, under the guise of the Straight Satans with Charles Manson, I'm over here saying, do the shit with the Satans. I need more than Danny. I need to start controlling these assholes. I got the Satan slaves who are about to become the Valley Hells Angels.
Yep.
So in future interviews, when he used to say Hells Angels, I thought he was talking out his ass. But what he meant was the Satan slaves who later became the Hells Angels.
Absolutely.
So you've got Charlie over here. So are we talking about someone trying to corner the market on a new drug on Charlie's side at the ranch with potentially, we're going to go very Nick Shrek here for a second. We've got at CLO Drive, Wojtek Frykowski trying to corner the MDMA market, maybe some other sniffables that we're not totally clear on that are, cocaine and more. There were some drugs at that point that didn't quite catch on.
That was something else that Bobby brought up in that interview. He's like, I barely knew Tex. He's like, I didn't like the guy. He's like, he had his own thing going, selling, dealing. And he's like, I know he had some kind of issue with those people up there in Benedict Canyon,
Absolutely. And then again, we come back to Helter Skelter. Susan Atkins, right in her testimony, what did she say? She was talking to Virginia Graham and her other bunkmate,
Bonnie Howard. Yep.
They're there. She says, repeatedly insisting the whole thing was about Melcher. We knew Melcher's house was up there. We knew how to get there. Tex knew the place. He'd spent a bunch of time with Melcher. Melcher was all about money. Melcher was a piece of shit. we don't like Melcher, these different things. So we keep coming back to this real vitriol towards Melcher in Virginia Graham, her testimony. So then we get back to that. She says, we didn't know how many people were up there. Could have been 1, could have been 10. We're just going to do them all in because Tex knew the layout of the house and we knew how to get up there. There it is. I think early testimony is like multiple guessing on your exam. Go with your first gut instinct. Some of that is very true. I think that was one of the motives for some of the people. Everyone's motive was a little different.
You know, I'm reading volume 91 when they're off the record and the jury's out of the room. I kind of like hearing the dialogue that takes place between the judge and the attorneys. I love it that we have that.
It's amazing.
And there's a point where they're arguing Irving Kinerick and Bugliosi. They're arguing over impeaching these women's testimonies and which one of them have deals and stuff. But I like it how they said Susan Atkins was the original darling of the prosecution.
Absolutely.
She then doesn't say quite what they wanted her to say in the grand jury testimony.
So
now Linda Kasabian becomes the darling.
Exactly, dude. And that was the thing, where to jump in with both feet like a paratrooper, man. Linda Kasabian and that sweetheart deal they cut her, because they were gonna people forget the deal they were gonna cut Susan out. Could you tell us more about the deal they were gonna cut with her?
They were only gonna take the death penalty off of the table with Susan,
which was pretty incredible.
Ended up getting outlawed a couple years later by California voters. Yeah. So I think her attorneys were a little short-sighted. They probably should have been able to read the room of the direction of the voters, and know that that was a possibility. But for whatever reason, they're trying to protect their client and take that off of the table, which I don't blame them. But Linda had some good attorneys, man. Gary Fleischman and a guy named Goldman. Excellent.
What they got her?
Yeah.
And then if you look at her character, you look at her record, you look at all the testimony of people that knew her previous to her alleged. I like how they always make it July 4th. I showed up on the 4th of July. We walked down the boardwalk. That was some love. My Alvin was talking about this. My Charlie. In every movie they do that. It's like all those just hacked out lines like, I'm the devil, ... right? So her being there, it wasn't a month. She ripped off. Dude,
absolutely, man.
How many burns had she done in that month? Well, here's what I heard, okay? I'm not going to beat the hell out of it, okay? But a survivor who was there, who saw Linda walk down the boardwalk that fateful July afternoon with her own baby.
Yep.
She was later abandoned with the family to take care of, that she was so afraid of for her life. So this person told me this woman threw off snake vibes. She had done anywhere that she knew of between 4 and 6 burns that she was aware of at that time. Her and Tex apparently had some sexual union that was so incredible that, like you say, all this time later, Tex still won't say a bad thing about Linda having had 4 kids in wedlock with the odd California. They had to take away prisoners' rights for conjugal visits because this one dude just abused the ever-living hell out of it. And those kids are all being cared for by the state because he's such a pile. Tex Watson has 4 kids in prison after doing all these hideous things. Kills a pregnant woman from Texas as a Texan.
Same hospital they were born at.
Exactly. And then he has 4 kids. Like somehow, like, my goodness. And then Deborah Tate has to just show up at these hearings. And then you'll see her when she laid out her paperwork. And this was pretty early in the case. Seriously, a yard of paperwork she was carrying. Like, my word, what these
Shout out Doris Tate, man, for getting
that's what I'm saying. Doris Tate was
but no,
just,
you're right, Deborah too.
well, I said Deborah, but
she picked up the ball.
well, no,
Yeah.
clearly what I meant was, thank you for that.
Yeah,
Doris Tate. It was like last time I got so excited.
no.
I can't say Morehouse. I just have to call her more sometimes because these characters, they become their own entities in our minds. But back to Al Springer and a lot of the horrible things he said. He spelled it out. He served him up on a platter in the most negative way. I like it as a counterbalance to the women weren't brainwashed. The women loved Charlie. They didn't think he was Jesus Christ. They didn't think he could walk on water. They didn't think he floated the bus over Mango Pass. They saw the fucking bus was torn up, and some of them were there and just saw him drive like a motherfucker and not give up.
Yep.
So, that being said, these types of things we have to take into account.
Great point. And I do recommend you guys check out that Springer interview. Cielo Drive YouTube. Just type in Al Springer. Was it a 1-parter or 2-parter? Do you remember?
He has it now. Thank goodness. On the audio archives, he would break it up. But now if you go to cielodrive.com on YouTube, he has it. It's about 2 hours and 20 minutes. It's just absolutely wonderful because what I say is he really rubbed everybody at the ranch the wrong way. They do not like the guy. And if you listen to the way he speaks, it's horrible. Like, he is not a nice guy, but I love that it exists because it also shows these people weren't brainwashed. They all had their own motives. You've got Linda Kasabian, multiple drug burns. She's like, wait a minute, we're going to go up there. Pollock dude has got all kinds of dope and money in those. Let's get up in there. And then she's had this crazy encounter with Tex that he still won't spill the beans on. But according to everybody else, they had some, maybe it was MDMA, who knows what they were on. They had some incredible sexual encounter that was just interstellar. So they had this bond. Her and Susan and them are all tweaking for days. So they're like, yeah. Everyone's got a different motive. Dude, if I had ripped up, syphilitic, bleeding, bare feet and bad teeth and a mustache as a woman, my motives would be different than Linda Kasabian, who was up there after money. And you think about it. She was probably going to bounce. She wasn't buying into the Charlie.
She did around the 12th or 13th. Yep.
She was
in homeboy Dave Hannum's Volvo. She didn't care, man.
Karate Dave. Shouts out to Karate Dave. But that being wrapping into what I'm saying with the whole idea that she wasn't a permanent person. She was going to go at some point anyway. And so she was the person, according to survivors who've told me, it was her who brought the word pig in. It was her who called people piggies. It was her pig, cop, pig, cop. So for Al Springer to say pig and cop, it makes me wonder how much time he'd spent around Linda and how much time he'd spent around Charlie, actually, realistically. But boy, he laid it out with a cutlass. You ask him, well, how did Charlie say these people were killed? And he goes, well, he just walk up, knock on their door, whip out his cutlass, and just put the chop to them. And that was what he said.
A couple other names from that interview you guys need to pay close attention to are Greg Knoll, the leader of the Straight Satans, and Robert Reinhardt.
Absolutely.
2 very important characters along with Al Springer.
And then I also recommend, as you are following this channel, as you are following this story, There's a few people, of course, the great Deb Silva, who we love, admire, and respect. Always CLO Drive with Bo Emerson. But one of the most important things you can do is learn everything you can about the Satan slaves and the straight Satans. And you can do that at the outlawarchive.com. He's got a wonderful Instagram. We're also talking about another Bo, Mr. Bo Bushnell, who is an acquaintance of mine. I like to consider him a friend. Hopefully, we're going to be visiting with him at the archive. And also, hopefully, he'll make his way up here and visit us in the studio, I hope. But his work on the Straight Satans and all these different clubs that were associated at Spawn Ranch and later became the San Fernando Valley chapter of the Hells Angels are all germane to the story. He has his own theories on the Manson killings and these different relationships that I hope he'll share with us because they are incredible. And I think they're a nice counterbalance to some of the more fantastical ones, which we're going to refer to on our next episode coming up soon. We again really want to acknowledge some of our great contributors here on Twilight Garage. Please do yourself a great kindness. Reflections, our dear friend and mentor is Lynn Frommy's book.
Pay a little bit extra, get an autograph edition.
We believe those are available at Peas and Hall Press through Mr. George Stimson. He's got a book out called Goodbye, Helter Skelter, which has been out there for a few years now and is basically the engine behind the recent documentary Making Manson. And that was on one of these newer channels. Was it a Peacock?
Yes, you're right.
Peacock. Okay. So back to y'all, Twilighters. Please keep tuning back in. We love you. Like, subscribe. We're going to be having some more giveaways, be having some more fun, getting back into this exciting early part of this book. If you take your time, read it slowly, you'll see someone say something incredibly shocking. Don't keep reading. Just hold up. Get on your device. Go on CLO Drive. Go on Outlaw Archive. You can really enrich your knowledge in a way that's incredible and wasn't available to us before in the days of these books. I just can't thank everyone enough. And like I said, I want to get to know our contributor, our main commenter, who I respect so much. I thought y'all were friends.
We are friends, but I don't know who he is.
I didn't know Sam Smith. Buddy, please. I'm just going to put my personal telephone number out there for Sam Smith. Dude, hit me up, please. Let's just start texting if you don't want to talk on the phone. Thank you for your insight. I've got questions for you because
he's a knowledgeable guy.
What? Wait a that. And listen to me, I got all excited. I'm sorry. I did once in my little brain the threads, the thing. He brought up a wonderful point. Why would the Stephen Parent altercation have happened contrary to the standard narrative pre-Tate murders? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So what you brought up recently, which you had explored on the internet as well on a different program, and brought the theory here, which I was unaware of. I'd heard somebody say that perhaps Parent had been murdered last that evening, but that was very powerful. And then Sam asked some questions. So Sam out there, please, if we can get you beyond comment, and if we could even get you to call in, you don't have to do a video thing or anything. That part of this early part of the story, you apparently have great insight to. And if any of y'all want to help us with that, we are going to do what no one else has done on this subject, and that's take as long as it does to satisfy these questions. On one hand, we've got Paul Tate. The other hand, We've got these alternate theories and narratives, and we're going to get to the bottom of them. And please, Colonel Scott, for the love of God, would you please check back into the internet and be a part of our Twilight experience? Please, 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 Colonel Scott. We love you, Twilighters. Thank you again. So glad you're back.